Welcome into the Crease, and today we are going to be discussing the Edmonton Oilers since the new kid on the block, the Knoblauch, has come in as their bench presence and their guiding light. They have been on one of the most historic heaters we have seen in the NHL history, all right? So be sure to come in here. We're about to go do this shit right here next on the Crease. Welcome into the Crease. Before we get into all the numbers and how historic this run is for the Edmonton Oilers, I want to give a big shout out to one of our affiliates, and that is Vivid Seats. If you are feeling going to a hockey game this year or any sporting event whatsoever, you have to go through Vivid Seats. They're one of our affiliates. You can check out the link in the description of this video and go live vividly at the barn of your choice. So, boys, I'm gonna get into these numbers real quick, and we've been tracking the Oilers. You know, it was wild. So before November 12th, they had 3 wins, 7 points, and everything else was just going downhill. You know, freaking McDavid didn't look good. Draisaitl looked like a shell of himself, and we pretty much all predicted that they would be sellers at the trade deadline. Since the hiring of Knoblauch, there are a plus 48 goal differential. November 12th was when he was hired. So plus 48 goal differential. They are 27-8-0. They have a .912 save percentage as a team and have had 54 points. And are now within 15 points of the Canucks, who are having a great year. And they have 5 games in hand to catch them. All since November 12th. They have been on one of just absolutely crazy. And the next craziest thing about this is that we really didn't think that McDavid could catch Kucherov, McKinnon in the points total. But he's also closing in. So the Oilers have absolutely been dominating the NHL for the better part of like a quarter of a year. I mean, that's what we're looking at, right? Like December, January, we're already at February 12th. That's 3 months. 3 months of just absolute domination. They are without a doubt the best, if not one of the best teams in that stretch since the hiring of Knoblauch. And the only thing, I have to give this man his credit. I believe Knoblauch's coaching style, his attitude, which we did address, we pointed out when the hiring happened, right? We were like, how is this going to turn? Is this going to turn them around? And we were a little skeptical. We weren't sure because he had never really been in this situation before, right? He had never been in the NHL as a primary coach and manager on the bench. And so far, this man is probably the best coaching hire of the year. And if they come back out of the gutter, right, out of the cellar, Knoblauch is a shoe-in for coach of the year. Yes or no, Gage? If they continue the run, is Knoblauch a shoe-in for coach of the year?
I'd have to say yes, just sheerly of how bad they were before he got hired and how everything's really come together. You know, he has had that history with McDavid and coaching McDavid when he was younger, and don't know how much that's had to play into it, or just his brand of what he wants to run on the ice is working, or the decision he's made to personnel. But something's going very right. And I said it a couple weeks ago and you guys gave me a weird look when I said this team is very potentially going to hop the Golden Knights and only have the Canucks that they're chasing, which is now looking like the case. Like they're going to come as the number 2 seed in the West. And that's wild. But it's hard to argue because no other coach has had like a super outstanding like turnaround with a team that was bad last year or really outperforming, other than maybe the Rangers, but I don't think it really doesn't compare. So 100% if he doesn't get coach of the year and they continue on this run, it's a travesty.
Yeah, it would be a travesty. And like you said, they've played 4 fewer games than the Golden Knights. They are only 7 points back. They go 4 or 5, they could potentially catch the Golden Knights, and be right there. And like I said, they're 5 games back of, or 5 games fewer played than the Canucks, and they're only 15 back of them. So we could be literally talking about them possibly catching the Canucks really, really fast. I mean, they go 5 for 5, right? Win all 5 of these next games. And we could easily see the Edmonton Oilers being a bid for the 1 seed in the West. And at that point, I don't think you could even argue that anyone else would get this Coach of the Year award except for Knoblauch. So, Ian, I'm going to go to you, man. If Knoblauch doesn't get it, who's his biggest competition right now for Coach of the Year in your eyes?
Honestly, the only other guy I could see winning it, there's a couple, but obviously Jim Montgomery comes to mind, maybe, but because the Bruins were supposed to take a hit this year, they haven't. I don't think Paul Maurice gets it, but he deserves a shout out. I really think his only competition would be Rick Tocchet in Vancouver, because you've seen the way Vancouver's played. You've seen the way Vancouver's played this year. The problem is, I don't know how sustainable Vancouver's run is.
We've been waiting for him to collapse. We really haven't.
We said that.
Here's the thing.
2 months ago, and they just still haven't fallen off.
Haven't done
Here's the thing, though. They could get to the playoffs and it could very well fall apart because.
Yeah, but at the regular season award, we said this.
We do go through
that
this
is true.
a lot.
I'm just saying,
I wish it wasn't.
I'm going down a rabbit hole. If Rick Tocchet, if the Vancouver Canucks win the President's Trophy, it's Rick Tocchet's trophy. Now, if the Oilers jump them, right now they're 15 points behind, but they've got, I think, 5 games in hand. If the Canucks start dropping games, which they have started to do a little bit, Edmonton's white hot right now. So there's a chance. They're 7 points behind Vegas. Let's look at the conference standings. They are currently, right now, they've dug themselves out of the basement to being more than respectable. They're number 6 in the West right now. 5 points behind Vancouver, 6 points behind Colorado and Vegas, 9 points behind Dallas, and they have games in hand on all of them.
Oh, they've played the fewest amount of games in the Western Conference. The only other team that's close is the Kings at 49, and they've also played 1 more game. So they're literally right on everybody's ass, and it is going to be incredible. They easily have the 4th best goal differential right now, and like I said, they're a plus 48, which means they were a minus 16 before November 12th.
I haven't watched enough Oilers games really, but to really make a judgment on whether or not their play is sustainable. But I'd say it. You think it is, Gage?
I can tell you it is, because I watched them play the Kraken live when I went right after Knoblauch got hired, and they're playing with speed, not super physical. They've never been a physical team. They're not going to destroy you defensively, but they've gotten solid enough goaltending, which is huge for Edmonton because that's what they've desperately needed for years.
So they're playing with a little bit more structure, probably.
It's not out of this world goaltending, but it's solid. Skinner has played phenomenal for them, and the thing is, I don't see where they'd fall off. I don't see which part of that game that they, barring injuries, I don't see them slowing down to a exponential pace of where they just fall apart again.
I mean, that's a good point, because what I say the blueprint should be for an NHL team should be a strong goaltending, followed by strong defense, followed by strong enough forward play. The exception's Edmonton. Because if you get good enough goaltending with Edmonton, we've seen it with teams like Colorado, where you just get good enough goaltending, you're going to make a run. And Edmonton has McDavid and Draisaitl playing otherworldly again. They continue that, there's not a lot of teams that can beat them. You just have to hope that they get good enough goaltending to support their 2 guys. And if they do we saw what they could do. They beat the Kings and torched Calgary a couple years ago. They've been to the conference finals recently. There's no reason they couldn't do it again, especially if they play with a little bit more structure, which they weren't getting with Woodcroft. I mean, it's definitely possible. And back to the original point, if Knoblauch does go on this miracle run and jumps everybody in the West, he's coach of the year, and it's not close.
And, the crazy thing is we're talking about it. I don't even think their goaltending has to be otherworldly. I think it needs to be good enough. And right now,
you need
that's what it is. I mean, they are, as a team, they are right at like the 14th best keeper save percentage, right? I think if I look at the numbers here, if I go off the percentage, right, I think at 14 is Connor Ingram for Arizona, and he's got a .912. That's what they have in this run. It's a .912, right? Like they are doing very, very well. And, Skinner, he's, averaging goals against 2.45 a game. I think that number's a little bloated from, the first month of the season when they were not doing well. And he's really come out to play. And like I said, he's not great, right? He's not going to be in the Vezina Trophy conversation, right? But he is playing just good enough that they can score enough to beat everybody else, right? Like, you don't have to have the best defense and the best goalkeeper in the world to win a Stanley, right? You just need it to be good enough so that your stars, your scorers can go out there and be dominant. And that's what they've been doing. I'll tell you right now, I've been looking at the points race. I've been looking at the goals race. McDavid is in the conversation. He's going to have a chance. It's going to be close as long as he can stay healthy and keep going. This team, I think they look better than they did last year. I think 100%. That Knoblauch has them playing a style of hockey that is complementary to their skill set. It is the best way they can play this game, right? And the numbers state it. I mean, in 3 months that he's been minding the bench, getting that team on track, they're the hottest team in hockey. And, we've been talking about the Bruins a lot on this segment. We've been talking about the Canucks a lot on this segment, the Stars and the Avalanche and the Jets in that three-way just meat grinder that's going on there in the Western Conference for that division. And we wrote Edmonton off way earlier in the season. Like, we all sat here and said that they would be sellers. And now there's a chance they could be buyers. So here's my question for you, Gage. Who helps Edmonton the most if they can get them in the building? Who do you think is going to be available that could help them the most if they can get them in the building?
I wish I prepped for that question. That's a good question.
Well, I like to get you on there, man.
Curveball there.
Well, I mean, because they're buyers now, 110%.
Okay, so hear me out.
100% buyers.
I've had this vendetta for a long time because I think he's personally an overhyped player. I would get a solid defenseman, like someone like, just throwing names that they will not get, like a Charlie McAvoy, like a Adam Fox. Like, you need those type of people in Edmonton to, even if your goalie's not having the greatest game, and again, he's playing average, which is what you need in Edmonton. But if you minimize shots against these goalies, you make that team so much better. Here's where my vendetta comes in. Yes, he's an alternate captain for your team. Yes, you have money invested in him. I would trade Darnell Nurse off that team and see what you can get back.
Not much, unfortunately.
I don't like Darnell Nurse's contract. He is a good defenseman and, like, on the offensive side, but he does very little for you defensively. He's just a big body. And he doesn't even play that physical for his huge size. I know that dude is very, very tall man. I've seen very close and nice on skates and these towers. But you need someone who plays very sure up defense. Like, you need a true lockdown defenseman on your first line, and it's going to make your team astronomically better. Where can they find that? That I really don't have an answer, but I would dangle Darnell Nurse and take a contract hit of his bulk of his contract to move him and get that piece. Because I think that's one of the people that the Oilers can move and get better for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, So here's the thing, right? I've been thinking about this, and I've been looking at defensemen because I too think they need a defenseman. And I'm going to give you a couple of names. They have some larger cap numbers, right? But maybe, depending on how the team's doing around. Let me look at the standings real quick. I'm going to look at the standings. Ian, I'm going to go ahead and let you go, and then I'll come with my answer. All right. So you go ahead. Who do you see that could help this team they could possibly add before the trade deadline? Because they are buyers right now.
So, to Gage's point, he said they play very fast. That would lead me to believe their defense is fairly mobile. So you don't need like a Miro Heiskanen skating type defenseman necessarily for your team. I've got a couple guys in mind. The obvious one is Chris Tanev. He brings everything that they don't necessarily have. Good shutdown defenseman and an excellent shot blocker. Another name that I've thought about for a little while, and he's played for the team before, so he'd be familiar with the dressing room. How much do you think Adam Larson helps this team as a defensive presence? Good right-handed shot defenseman. He can play in your top four. Not necessarily the fastest guy, but he's a shot suppressor, and he can chip in offense here and there. I kind of like the fit there in Edmonton.
I don't think Seattle moves Adam Larson. That was my issue with that.
But as a scheme fit?
But as a traditional fit, if you're not talking about the other end of that trade, yeah, 100%. I saw him for a lot of years in Jersey.
You'd probably have to give up like Dylan Holloway and maybe a pick or two to get Larson as an overpayment because they're not going to trade him to a division rival.
They're also not going to trade their captain.
Exactly. Oh, he's the captain now? Oh. I mean, they're not in a playoff spot, and they're kind of...
Seattle's fringed right now, so I think that's a little much of an ask for a team.
Yeah, but fringed, but they're 6 points out. I don't think they're going to make it. They don't have it this year.
I can't say one way or another. I also probably would hedge that they don't make it, but I think as an organization that you can't really pawn off that piece when you're still close enough and you just made a run last year. So I think it's puts in a predicament.
Here's the thing, though. You're just not scoring enough in Seattle, and that's kind of what buoyed them last year. Adam Larson's 31, and he's arguably one of their who I haven't watched enough Seattle this year, and I apologize. Vince Dunn is obviously their number one defenseman. Is Larson their number two, or is it Borgen, Schultz, Dumoulin? Who's that number two guy in Seattle? Probably Larson.
Yeah, Larson's not number one.
No, it's 100% Vince Dunn, and they're not going to trade him. He's a piece of the core. I wouldn't trade him either. He's wonderful. I just don't know if you'd get much value out of him past this year because he's 31 years old. Now's the time to move him. You can take on a guy, maybe say we want a first-round pick in Dylan Holloway, and you can have Adam Larson. And I think that's a trade Edmonton takes. Maybe add a few more, maybe add a piece or two in there, maybe on both sides.
Their top line is Vince Dunn and Larson.
Exactly. But here's my thing. Go into a little bit of a retool in Seattle because I don't think you're going to make it into the playoffs anyway, and I don't think you're going to make it in with the roster they've constructed. Retool and accrue some assets. Larson's not going to be in his prime for much longer, so why not get something out of him while you can?
I'm not saying the move doesn't make sense, but
you got to put out a lot of good names. A couple of guys.
Go ahead, Joe.
I've looked at a couple of guys, right? And there was a guy I was thinking of, but he's also on a team that currently holds the wild card spot that you're saying, maybe the Kraken can't make, and that's the St. Louis Blues with let me see here. I got the name.
I think I know who you're gonna say.
Colton. Where's that?
Parayko.
Colton Parayko. I like that one. He's 30, but he's got a large contract, right? It's a large contract, and if the Blues were a little out of there, he's been playing pretty well. You don't really need a world stopper at defense. You just need bodies realistically on the defensive side, and I think some of these guys are upgrades. Another one that I really like is Mike Matheson out of Montreal. I think that he's been playing pretty decently. He's got a chance He's been making a lot of stops, kind of playing up there a little bit. And the next guy I'm going to name, with especially the Canadians out, right? Like they're far enough back. I don't think they're making the playoffs. They could be sellers. He's kind of got a large contract. He's getting older. He's 29. Somebody they may want to shuck a little bit, depending on his age. He's got that. I think he signed an 8-year contract. Let me see when that was. In 2017. So he's right there at the end of it. He's got 1 year left on it, and then that's he's the kind of guy you would move, right? Like he's got 1 year left on his contract, and then my next guy here is actually he's on a pretty contract friendly deal right here. Is Sean Durzi out of Arizona?
I like Sean Durzi. That would be a great.
He's a young guy. They're not making the playoffs right now, and they could use some capital, maybe a little bit of senior leadership in Arizona, So you think about those two guys. I really think Mike Matheson and Sean Durzi could be the targets there because both those teams are out. Both those teams could use, especially the Montreal could use, to shuck that contract a little bit, get something in return for a guy that you're probably not going to really want or have next year, who's going to be 30 and be looking for something equivalent to what he got in his last contract. Or Sean Durzi, who's a younger guy who didn't get a great contract anyway, but, he's just signed that 2-year deal, so he's got 1 more year of control. I think those are big names that Edmonton could target to shore up their, defensive core and really give them some help. What's crazy too here is that we're sitting here talking about Edmonton, and every time we've talked about Edmonton in the past, all we've said is goalie help, goalie help, goalie help. And then we all just sat here and did not name a single damn goalie.
It's not worth it to them.
Yeah.
I think it's not.
It's also, I don't know how much good it would do, to be honest with you.
I think Stuart Skinner is playing.
He's at the level where it's not a concern anymore.
It's not the glaring weakness of your team, and it's the best way to get that team better.
Bolster the back end
is to tighten up the blue line and have Skinner face less shots, especially because he's playing the best year of probably his career at net right now.
100%.
So if you put those two together, the benefits of a defenseman versus a goalie right now for Edmonton for once is defenseman will give you greater benefit in the long run.
The other thing is, though, with Edmonton, the more I think about it, their style of play, no goalie would succeed there. No. I don't think with the way they were all offense, and how many shots a game did they allow?
I think they averaged 28 to 30 shots a game on that.
Okay, but how many, let me rephrase that question. How many high danger chances was Edmonton allowing a game?
I'd have to dig into that.
I'd have to look. Because
I'm pretty sure it was
I had to guess it would have to be close to 10.
Exactly. And no goalie's going to survive in that situation. I don't care if maybe Carey Price, maybe Corey Schneider. Prime Carey Price, prime Corey Schneider is another guy that comes to mind. But they don't have those guys, and there aren't those guys in the league. So just bolster your back end with some more defense. You look at Vegas right now. Vegas has a very good defense core, and I'm not saying anything negative about Aiden Hill, but that defense has propped up Aiden Hill a little bit to the point where he's a .937 save percentage when he was a career journeyman before.
So that's what I'm saying.
It's the whole thing. If you minimize high percentage shots and minimize shots, your goalie's numbers will balloon.
They'll go up. So
you just have to be a good goalie, not a great one, in that system, and you succeed. The team succeeds. It's just hard getting that good of a defense at the blue line with enough offensive support to keep the puck out of your end for 3/4 of the game.
And
which, to your point, Joe, I loved the idea of Sean Durzi.
Yeah.
He'd be a perfect fit there. The problem is, with the way he's playing, do the Coyotes see him as a part of the future core?
Yeah, you would say that they maybe do, but the contract he signed to doesn't reflect that at all. It's a 2-year deal he signed this year. It's only $3 million, and $2 million of it is this year.
Yeah, but he's playing much better this year. And
he's playing much better. Plus, he's getting that.
He's going to demand a lot more money.
I agree with that.
Plus, with an elevated role after getting buried on the Kings. So he's 25 years old, a guy entering his prime, And when you look
And
at the
that's what I'm saying,
Coyotes,
like-
they don't have many prospects at the defensive position.
That's very true, but I think they may see him as that piece that could get, like, having one surefire defenseman is great, right? A guy who's outperforming what you thought he might be.
Mm-hmm.
However, in Arizona's current situation, I think they might look at it as, this is a cash cow. We could get a decent amount of return on this because he does have a low contract, because he is coveted, because, I mean, you have to look at it from both sides of the coin. Yes, retaining him could mean something for you, right? But this could be one of those things where it's like, can we afford him? Is he a luxury we can afford, since he's going to want that new contract at some point in time next year? And if they really were that interested in it, I feel like they would have extended him. Granted, he signed it this year, and so there's some stuff there, there's some issues, and he's outperforming that contract. But I think that Sean Durzi would be my number one option in Edmonton. Mike Matheson would be my second. And the only reason those two guys I think are your best chance, because those teams will be sellers and they'll be at least have the phones going, right? They're going to be at the phone waiting to take the call. It's just how much that they're going to ask to get Dirt. What's your prediction? Hit me with it.
I think the Oilers trade for a Coyotes defenseman, not Sean Durzi. I think the guy on the move out of Arizona is going to be Yusuf. I don't know. I don't like that fit at all.
I mean, I agree that, but at the same time, I think that if they don't make a call on Durzi, they're fucking up. Yeah, you have to call about. I mean, I would be calling about anyone who's got a defenseman that you can fit in your salary cap.
You have to. It's the perfect fit.
So here's the question now. I'm going to start with you on this one, Ian. If the Oilers do not make a move, how far do they go in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Same as last year, if they don't get knocked out in round one. And I could very well see Vegas knocking them out in round one.
I mean,
I think they go too high in the seeding to play Vegas.
Yeah.
Do you think they jump Vancouver?
I think they could easily catch. I think bold prediction, I think they are going to be on Vancouver's ass with like 2 weeks left to play. It's going to be who wins the most games in the last 2 weeks. Vegas is going to
finish 3 seed, but I don't think Vegas is going to probably finish the 3 seed. But I mean, Edmonton would have home ice in that series. I just don't see any team catching Vancouver. Now, if they do, round two, like Vegas playing Edmonton playing St. Louis, Edmonton's going to win that series 10 times out of 10.
The worst matchup in the playoffs for the Edmonton is Vegas. Can we all agree on that?
Yeah, the physicality of Vegas is going to absolutely disrupt. Yeah.
Structurally, I think they match up better against Vancouver, but still not great. But it's just better than Vegas, because we saw it last year. How Vegas just plays is the opposite of how Edmonton wants to play the game, and more often than not, the physical teams win in the playoffs. Yeah, it's just how it's been in hockey.
I hate that. I think Vegas might. I hate that Vegas might go back to the Cup final. I think they're the conference final.
They have some health issues there, but
in this scenario, I think Vancouver and Vegas playing round one. I think Vancouver matches up better.
Yeah, they do.
And that means Edmonton just has to take care of business against St. Louis, and hopefully Vancouver takes care of business, knocks the Knights out, and that gives the Oilers a very, very solid chance going forward.
However, you
still have to beat Canucks at the end.
That's if LA doesn't drop to the second wild card spot. Vegas, Edmonton, LA round 3,
which would be awful because that means Edmonton has home ice, and we also how Vegas has been playing away this year.
Yeah. Jeez.
Wild times.
Hey, by the way, don't let that happen, LA. I'd rather play you in round 1 than St. Louis. Bad things happen when we play the Blues.
I mean, to be fair, I'm in full agreement. I think it's 100% in agreement on this panel that if they do nothing, it's a repeat of what we saw last season.
Yeah, your ceiling's now the conference finals again.
Yeah, and
if that
comparatively to where they were in the first week of November, that is way better than what we thought they were going to be. So that good on you. But I feel like there has to be a change on the defenseman's position. There has to be. You have to go get somebody.
You at least have to bolster it.
And we named what, 7 guys that could
again,
easily.
If you trade Darnell Nurse for like one of the bigger names on the blue line that on a struggling team, like,
I mean, you could like. I think that with the youth, that's like there's some young guys on there, and you're trying to shore up Connor McDavid. You're trying to do for Connor McDavid what the Penguins couldn't do for Sid the Kid in a lot of situations, is get him the help he needs at the right spots that was actually serviceable. And I think that Edmonton,
the big three the Penguins had, it was Malkin, Crosby, and Chris Letang.
Yeah, and you need that one other guy. I don't know if Sean Durzi can be that guy, like quite at that level, but I think that he's a start.
He's not the solution, but he's definitely
a part of it.
He'd be a start for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
now
I'm not saying he's going to solve all your woes, but I mean, he's a young guy that I think can at least keep up with the pace of this team, because that's the hardest part for Edmonton. You have to not only find a guy who can play really good defense, but he has to be able to skate at the pace of which you need him to skate at, right? So a lot of these older guys that just don't have the legs under them anymore, those aren't good options for you. You have to find a young guy who's got a nose for the puck, isn't afraid to throw his body out there, and can skate with his hair on fire. So. And Sean Durzi, I feel like fits that bill a little bit, and that's why I picked that name. I thought that was a good call there. We'll see though. Like you said, he's a young guy. He's playing above his contract right now, and it all is going to come down to whether Arizona, how they value him. But that is all we have time for today. Be sure to tune in next week. We're going to be putting out all kinds of videos. Be sure to go like, follow, subscribe on all of the house call platforms. We got tons of new channels on YouTube. We got the Gridiron segment for football. We have the Fight Pit segment for all of our WWE, UFC, and boxing videos. We have the Brick House for all of our basketball videos. That's the NBA coverage. We have the Bush League Bros, which is all of our MLB coverage. We obviously have the Crease, which we are on right now, and our main channel, the House Call Sports. All that on YouTube. You can all check out all the social media platforms, including Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Threads, Facebook, all of those. We are there. More content always coming out all the time. And we'll be right back here next week on The Crease.